Hi, I'm Richard, and welcome to Unsolved Kingdom. So, for my first video, I thought I'd take a look at a double murder that takes us north to Scotland, more specifically to the city of Dundee. The murders of Carol Lannon and Elizabeth McCabe shocked Dundee to its core and gripped the city with fear for months. Were the murders linked? Was Elizabeth's death a copycat, or was it a serial killer stalking the streets of Dundee looking for victims? I'll let you decide at the end of this deep dive that I'll be taking into both cases today. 18-year-old Dundee working girl Carol Lannon, who had a 3-month-old son, was picked up from her home in Hill Street and taken by taxi to the city centre by Commercial Street. This taxi driver was never traced. She was last seen getting into a red Ford Cortina estate taxi in Exchange Street, the city's red light district, on Monday, March the 20th, 1979, wearing a black velvet jacket. Girls working in the red light area described the driver as a thin man with a pale complexion, short dark hair, sideburns and a moustache, resulting in the police creating a photo fit. The next afternoon, her naked body was discovered partially covered by snow in the woods. Her handbag and clothes were missing. She had been strangled. 11 days later, a young girl found Carol's handbag and some clothing about 85 miles away on the banks of the River Don in Aberdeenshire. Police therefore believe that the killer had a connection to the Aberdeenshire area. In the weeks that followed, more than 7,000 people were interviewed, but police couldn't find any evidence that led to her killer. The inquiry was scaled back and the trail got colder. Elizabeth McCabe was a 20-year-old trainee nursery nurse who was described as quiet and shy. She rarely drank or went on nights out until about 3 or 4 months before her murder. On Sunday, the 10th of February 1980, she left her home in Lyndhurst Avenue, Lochie, for a night out with friends. They went to several pubs, but eventually ended up at Teaser's Disco in Union Street. Her friend, Sandra Niven, said Elizabeth had been crying in the disco toilets that night because she believed that nobody liked her. Sandra said at the end of the night, at around 12:30 a.m, the pair became separated as they were leaving, and she had expected to find Elizabeth at the entrance of the nightclub. Unfortunately, there was no sign of Elizabeth and she was nowhere to be seen. Now, Sandra looked for her and checked a nearby taxi rank but couldn't find Elizabeth and assumed that she'd just gone off on her own. Elizabeth failed to return home that night and her parents were immediately concerned, since this was out of character for Elizabeth and she had work the next day. 24 hours later, her mother reported her missing in the mistaken belief that she had to wait 24 hours before she could report a missing person. It was believed that Elizabeth had attempted to get home by taxi, since at the time of night she would not have been able to get home by any other means. Unfortunately, 16 days after she disappeared, Elizabeth's naked body was found in a small clearing in Templeton Woods on the outskirts of the city of Dundee by 2 men hunting rabbits with their dogs. She was found with a dark blue jumper draped over her shoulders, and a pile of branches had been placed on top of her in an attempt to hide the body. A post-mortem revealed that Elizabeth had died from asphyxia caused by compression of the neck, so she had also been strangled. And not only was she found in similar circumstances to Carol, but her body was discovered in an area only 150 yards away, where 11 months previously they had found Carol's body. Between the time Elizabeth disappeared and late February, some of her clothing was found at Cooper Angus Road in the city, near to the Kingsway. 2 months after the murder, on the 2nd of April 1980, Elizabeth's jewellery and a photo belonging to her were also found in Cobden Street. Her shoes were found a few weeks later in the Cobden Street area. 2 witnesses reported seeing a Ford Cortina with a taxi sign on it emerge from a road which led to Templeton Woods on the night Elizabeth disappeared. They reported that the driver appeared to be alone in the car with the interior lights switched on, and that he appeared to be driving with his wrists instead of his hands, as if he may have had dirty hands and didn't want to touch the steering wheel. The two witnesses reported that this was the taxi of Vincent Simpson, who ran a local taxi company in Newtile near Dundee. He happened to drive a Ford Cortina taxi at that time, and as a result, Simpson was questioned by police and admitted being in the woods on the night Elizabeth disappeared, claiming he had taken his dog for a walk there at about 10 p.m, and saying that he had returned to the woods after midnight on his way to collect a fare in Dundee. He claimed in a statement that he had gone back to steal a car that he had seen in the woods before. Simpson had a criminal record dating back to when he was a child, and he was a heavy gambling addict. When shown a picture of Elizabeth, he claimed he didn't recognise her. He protested that he did not have any convictions for violence or sexual crimes, but in an interview on the 3rd of March 1980, he admitted to being a peeping Tom who used binoculars to spy on courting couples in Templeton Woods. He also reportedly admitted to other unpleasant and embarrassing things in interviews. Now, I'll show you a photo of Simpson. I'll also put next to it the photo fit that was previously seen, and I'll let you make your own decisions, bearing in mind there's a 17-year difference in the images. They look quite similar. Despite a large and widely publicised manhunt for the killer, police failed to charge anyone with the murder of Elizabeth, and late into 1980 the investigation was wound down but left open. In 1996, Tayside Police ordered a new review to take place of the murders of Elizabeth McCabe and Carol Lannon, following the reopening of the Bible John case in Glasgow. In 2004, detectives from 3 police forces in Scotland announced that there were strong links between the then unsolved murders of 7 young women, including the murders of Elizabeth and Carol, and the World Ends murders. These murders were investigated under Operation Trinity, and serial killer Angus Sinclair was identified as the prime suspect in all of the murders. Sinclair was subsequently convicted of the World's End murders on DNA evidence and remains the prime suspect in 3 of the other murders, that of Anna Kenny, Hilda McCauley and Agnes Cooney in Glasgow during 1977. However, it was discovered that Sinclair definitely could not have committed the murders of Carol and Elizabeth, since prison records show that he was imprisoned when both of the murders occurred. Investigators subsequently ruled out a link between the Templeton Woods murders and the 5 other cases, and also ruled out a link between the murders of Carol and Elizabeth themselves. The re-investigations of 2004 led to Elizabeth's case being reopened, and with advancements in DNA profiling, which wasn't discovered at the time of the murders, items in the McCabe murder case were sent for DNA analysis in 2004. New public appeals were launched, which led to 2 notable calls from the public regarding the concerning behaviour of an unknown taxi driver who operated in the area at the time in 1980. In 2005, police arrested Vincent Simpson, the taxi driver who had been the suspect of the original investigation at his home in Camberley in Surrey. He was charged with the murder in 2005 and sent for trial in 2007. Now, Simpson's trial began in October 2007 in Edinburgh. Simpson had several previous convictions, mostly for dishonesty and petty crime, having been convicted of larceny in 1967, going equipped to steal in 1970, theft in 1974, burglary and theft in 1977, and fraud and making a false statement to police in 1981. However, the jury did not hear of these previous convictions, as Scottish law prevents previous convictions being heard in court. The defence had attempted to get the case against Simpson thrown out in the early stages, but were unsuccessful. They had claimed he could not receive a fair trial due to the fact that some witnesses from the time had either died or could not be traced, and because some of the documents and items from the original investigation were missing, whilst also saying that prosecuting him would breach his human rights. The judge, correctly rejected these claims, saying that while the passage of time since the murder had caused some disadvantage, he was not convinced that any trial would not be fair. Simpson also faced 2 other charges of breach of the peace on the grounds that he had approached women in Dundee at around the same time as the murder and caused them distress and alarm. At the trial, it was heard that DNA found on the jumper draped over Elizabeth, where she was dumped, very likely came from Simpson. Swabs taken from 3 different parts of the jumper all matched the DNA profile of Simpson. The chances of the DNA found on the right-hand side of the jumper's neck coming from someone other than Simpson were estimated to be at 1 in 320,000. The chances of the DNA from the back of the jumper coming from anyone other than Simpson were 1 in 105,000. A hair found on the black plastic sheeting used to transfer Elizabeth's body to the mortuary in 1980 was also found to match Simpson's DNA, with the test indicating the chances of it not belonging to him were 1 in 1,300. Together, the combined odds of the DNA coming from someone unrelated to Simpson were 1 in 40 million. And Dr. Jonathan Whitaker, who conducted the DNA tests, testified under oath, "In my opinion, these DNA profile results provide extremely strong support for the assertion that the DNA recovered from the hair and blue jumper has originated from Vincent Simpson." He was denied at the trial that they had ignored other possible suspects, saying that, and I quote, "The investigation was led by the evidence, and there comes a time when the evidence points to an individual, not police bias." Simpson himself claims to have an alibi, saying he was either at home, ferrying fares around the Dundee area, or at a local casino when the murder happened. However, police revealed that they had questioned the casino doorman at the time, and that the man told them he hadn't remembered seeing Simpson that night. And the casino doorman also testified at the trial of Simpson had in fact phoned to pressurise him into claiming to police that he had been there at 1 a.m. that night. At trial, the detectives on the case denied there had been contamination, with retired Detective Inspector Ian Kennedy saying that police took every step to ensure this didn't happen. On a video shown to the jury of detectives examining evidence, Kennedy said that my recollection of that exercise was that we took every possible step to make sure there was no chance of contamination. He added that contamination was also not necessarily a problem if the source of the contamination was known. The jury was shown a video of Simpson in a police interview after he was arrested, in which he said that the DNA evidence was tainted, but replied when he was asked if he was accusing police of planting evidence, I quote, "It doesn't happen, does it?" At the end of the trial, the judge told the jury that they must not convict Simpson on the basis of DNA evidence alone. Subsequently, the jury found 61-year-old Simpson not guilty by a majority verdict in December 2007. McCabe's mother and other members of her family attended the trial almost every day and were reported to have been distressed by the verdict, with Ali Reid of Tayside Police commenting, and I quote, "Elizabeth's family are understandably disappointed at today's verdict. They understand and support the reasons behind the reinvestigation of Elizabeth's death and appreciate the efforts of those involved in bringing the matter to court." Detective Chief Inspector Ewan West said that he was disappointed for the McCabe family at the verdict. The BBC later reported that at the trial there now seems little hope of closure for the McCabe family or for the Templeton Woods to shed its association with unsolved murder. Despite the defence questioning the reliability of the DNA evidence, the Crown publicly defended the decision to prosecute Simpson and said that there was sufficient evidence to prosecute him. After the verdict, police said that they were not looking for anyone else in the case. Tayside Police continued to separately appeal for information on the murder of Carol Lannon in 2008, with police believing members of the public held key information that was key to solving the case. After the law on double jeopardy was changed in Scotland in 2011, allowing previously acquitted suspects to be retried if new evidence materialised, the McCabe case was subject to a new review. In 2013, Simpson, who had returned to living in Camberley and working as a window cleaner, spoke to the Daily Record, saying he did not fear the new investigation into the murder and saying, I quote, "The cold case will go on and on. The police have got no avenues to go down." He also revealed that he had been back to the court where he was cleared to watch trials from the public gallery. In 2018, officers ruled out a bizarre link to the deaths with that of the infamous Zodiac killer, the man responsible for the Zodiac slayings, which terrorised Northern California from 1968 to 1974. He was also linked to the murder of Miss Lannen after the dossier evidence was given to Tayside Police in 2005. The dossier stated the killer had fled to Scotland and said the Zodiac's last act was the murder of Miss Lannen, but the theory was eventually quashed by investigators in California. In 2020, a senior investigator on the McCabe case told STV News that the murders of Elizabeth and Carol could still be solved, although police say that there was no plan to reinvestigate the cases. Later in 2020, the family of an American man being investigated for several cold case killings think that he may have been involved with the infamous Templeton Woods murders. His relatives believe he could have been involved and have offered DNA to look for a familial link. The man died in 2019, and who knows if we'll ever find the results of these new DNA tests, or if there will ever be any closure for the McCabe family or the Lannen family. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative. Let me know what your thoughts are on the cases in the comments below. Have a debate, have a chat. I will get back to everyone. And thanks very much for watching Unsolved Kingdom. I'm Richard, and I hope I'll see you next time.